Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Ditz, thank you for redeeming first. How you doing, buddy? Good seeing you. Shock, welcome in. Kitten, welcome in. Yes. Yes, there's just poor media as well. That is, unfortunately, or rather fortunately, not the topic we're talking about today. Thank you for doing second, Shock. I appreciate it. I hope everybody is well. Good seeing you all. I was waiting so I could get it. I saw you. I texted you on Discord, Ditz. And I said, I haven't even started stream, and I see you in the fucking VIP list. But yeah, we are kindly defecate yourself on this fine day. I will shit myself later. But hi, everybody. Welcome in. I didn't get the notification. That's weird. I'm looking at our DMs right now. It's strange. Oh, well. Well, you know now, so. For Grandfather Nurgle, I suppose. Yeah. But hi, guys. Welcome in. Good seeing you all. I am super excited to bring you Warhammer Wednesday today. It's my favorite thing to do all the time. I have a few exciting things to show you guys. One that I can show you very soon, and one that I can show you at the end of stream that I am excited. Warhammer Wednesday. Yup. How you doing, Rena? Welcome in. I just checked. I got the message. Discord hates me. It doesn't give me notifications. Discord hates me too. Welcome in, Rena. Good seeing you. How you doing? Yeah, today's all about Warhammer. I just woke up. Well, then you gotta get some food in you. You must be hungry. But yeah, welcome in. So a few things before we start. Our topics for today. Noam, you want to rot in the bed for a while for a widow. Are you peoples from Sucky Baby joining today, or is the average lonely deaf experience? I am not lonely, first of all. And second of all, my people from Sucky Baby are here. Rena's from Sucky Baby, and this is a solo Warhammer Wednesday stream. Sure you're not. Yeah, whatever you say, Shock. But yeah, some prefacing. Prefacing. We have a few things to talk about. It's going to be hopefully a longer Warhammer Wednesday. We're going to talk about the Sisters of Battle, the Sisters of Silence, the Officio Assassinorum, specifically the Calidus Assassins, and then we're going to talk about the Death Cult Assassins. So that's a lot of things. It's a lot of things to cover, and we will likely get through it depending on the Banana Sisters. Sure, that's one way to refer to them, yeah. The Banana Sisters. They certainly do work alongside the Banana Boys. Welcome in, Code. Good seeing you, though. Yeah, so we're going to talk about them in great detail, as well as, for some of you who probably Tora is a woman. Yes. So for some of you who haven't been here before for a Warhammer Wednesday, we do like to take a little unique spin on the lore, because I could just sit here for an hour or two and just read directly from the fucking Wikipedia or from a book and give you the lore that way. I don't think that's as fun as adding a bit of story to it and adding a bit of like a message to what I'm telling you. So Sisters of Silence are exciting. So how this is going to work is I'm going to tell you about them, what I like about them, what I think was really cool about each of these groups of people, their factions, their notable moments, and the cool aspects about them on top of their origins. And then at the end of stream, we're going to do a little bit of a reflection on sort of why they are the way that they are, what brought them to this point, all of the sort of psychological things that, all that kind of stuff. It's sort of what brings them there, why their motivations, what their inspirations are, and sort of spin a sort of message for you guys to take from this. So I'm excited to do that with you guys today because I love yapping about it. Yes, the Sixth Factor where the Space Marines will struggle with their workout routine. We're going to get into all of that about the differences between Space Marines and Sisters of Battle, all that kind of stuff. where, you know, the differences between them and sort of the what makes them unique and what makes them set apart from Space Marines, and why there is a constant fandom struggle to resist making Space Marines female. We are going to get into all of that, but we're not going to talk about that right away. Before we switch over, I have a surprise for you guys that when we switch over to my next scene, you guys are going to see almost immediately, and I hope you like it. It just got finished, and I really, 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 really hope you like it, because I fucking love it. So we're going to switch over to the gaming scene, and we're going to be used that as our sort of projector. Dev is becoming a whammon. No. If you can see here, this is my new overlay. And that is Twitch, by the way, being displayed on Twitch. There you go. We'll go here. Yeah, so this is my new gaming overlay. As you can see above me, you've got the new chat, which looks fucking great. And I'm a little centered in between it. And then if you look sort of, oh no, it's Twitch, how horrible. I'm glad you guys like it. Yeah, if you look above, you've got a audio visualizer sort of bar up top with my music that's putting out animated notes, which then come across screen. And then I've got my latest follower, latest cheer, donator, recent subs, etc. all on the bottom. And then, of course, the primary stuff in the middle. I am very happy with it. The artist is Lofty Works on VGen, and they did an amazing job, and they're super easy to work with and cooperate with. So I recommend checking them out. I've linked them in, well, not necessarily linked them, but I credited them in my about pages on Twitch. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you guys like it. I have another one that I'm going to show you later at the end of the stream that you guys will also hopefully like. And it is exciting. So let's start. Let's talk about, you have CVS receipt stuck on your shoulder. That, my friend, is a purity seal. And we're going to talk about those in detail today because they make, they're very important. It's just about Imperium women. It's about women in the Warhammer universe, but I am focusing on the factions that I spoke of earlier, and specifically women within those. For Warhammer Wednesday, we don't generally do specific character profiles until we've covered the factions that they're from. Like, for example, I want to do a stream on Lotara Saren, the World Eaters, one of the women from the World Eaters. Can't speak. She is the shipmaster, or, well, Lord Captain, if you want to refer to her that way. They do not work. As you can see, an actual Incubus is wearing one. If they did work, he'd be burning up into hell. Yeah. If the purity seal on my chest was actually effective, it would be killing me. But we're going to get into all of that today about miracles. Is a chaos demon of the Imperium? Sure. If you prescribe to that philosophy that those can exist, sure, we can interpret it that way. But yeah, we're going to be going over a lot of different stuff. It's going to be all-encompassing today, so just stay tuned. If you have questions, please ask questions. And remember, I have had to remind people about this in the past. No matter how knowledgeable that you are on 40K, this is my stream, and I am the one presenting. So I would ask that instead of teaching, let me do the teaching, and then if you have something to add that you feel that I haven't mentioned, I either haven't got to it yet, or I don't remember it, and then you can add. But that is when prompted. There's no such thing as a purge foul demon. Yes, I am a purgeable foul demon for sure. Okay, so by forcing him to shit himself, let's start with what are the Sisters of Battle and what makes them special and unique and what sets them apart from everything else. So the Sisters of Battle, also known as the Adeptus Sororitas, it is important. Okay, they're the subs. No purging death. He's my homeboy. Exactly. Thank you, Ditz, for the 5 gifted subs. Seriously, man, I appreciate that. Dude, come on. That's crazy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's crazy, man. I just got paid. That's awesome. I also got paid today. Twitch payout was today. Okay. So, it is important to note, by the way, that the Sisters of Battle and the Adeptus Sororitas are technically two different entities, because the Adeptus Sororitas is the entire faction as a whole, and it doesn't just encompass the Sisters of Battle. It also encompasses the other militant orders within the Adeptus Sororitas, which we will get into as well, because there are different parts of that. You have Sisters of Battle who are purely meant to fight, and then you have Sisters of Battle who aren't battle, like they're not typically soldiers. They are capable of battle, but they do not typically serve a battlefield role, which we will also get into, because there are nuances between them. But it's important to remember that some people think that Sisters of Battle and Adeptus Sororitas are direct translation. They're not. So Adeptus Sororitas is the faction/organization, and the Sisters of Battle are the specific battle sisters, like the actual warrior women within that faction. So now that's that cleared out of the way. They were founded during the 36th millennium, during turbulent times known as the Age of Apostasy. During this age, the ecclesiarchy, which is the sort of massive religious body that the Imperium operates with, basically held nigh total power. Like, the ecclesiarchy consolidated all of its power and started really strong-arming the other organizations within the Imperium. And there's an individual that we're going to get to that is sort of the cause for all of this. But yeah, so they sort of held a lot of power and became sort of the de facto rulers of the Imperium at that time. Now, yeah, that makes sense. It's the church. It's basically the uber powerful church. There's always been a balance before then, where it's like you've got several different administrations that run the Imperium, other than the Emperor himself. The Emperor currently can't run the Imperium because he's basically dead, but that's not something we're going to talk about. You've got the Adeptus Administratum, which is the grand administration of the Imperium. You've got the Adeptus Ministorum, which is also the ecclesiarchy. It's just another name for it. Then you've got the Adeptus Mechanicus, which are the, if you know Warhammer at all, you know who the Adeptus Mechanicus are. EMP is a scrub. He dead. Bruh, he is not a scrub. He's my hero. He's currently in a form of perpetual stasis / undeath. He's basically teetering that line between being absolutely dead to being just alive. His consciousness is still very active, and his psychic link to the warp, which we will get at. We have to talk about the warp if we're talking about the Sisters of Silence later, so we'll get to that. But for those of you who don't know the warp, don't worry, you will find out soon. So that out of the way, right? So the ecclesiarchy is taken pretty much full and total control of the Imperium. They use this total power to ensure that every single subject of the Emperor in the Imperium paid their dues, both spiritually and financially, to the duly appointed officers of the faith. In time, the Ministorum, or the ecclesiarchy, exercised so much power that it began to dictate the policy of the ruling Senatorum Imperialis of the High Lords of Terra. So I mentioned the three core things. That is the Adeptus Mechanicus, which are the robot dudes / mech boys / dudes who work with machines, and basically are the manufacturers of the Imperium, who create all the weapons, armor, and equipment. So, and then you have the Administratum, which are basically, they are the administration, the law, they're the logistics people. And then you've got the Ministorum, which is like the military / ecclesiarchy and religious body. So they manage when troops are being sent places and what troops are being there and stuff like that. And then above all of that, you have the Adeptus Terra, also referred to as the Senatorum Imperialis, which can be translated as the Imperial Senate. So the High Lords of Terra are a group of individuals who lead those respective organizations. There's 12 of them typically, and they're sometimes referred to as the High 12. So I did not necessarily name all of the orders that they are a part of, and thus, in charge of, but I gave you the three basic ones that basically run the Imperium. The rest are sort of secret slash branch organizations. So, for example, the High Lords of Terra are as follow: the Master of the Adeptus Administratum. So that man is the leader of the Adeptus Administratum, man or woman. The representative of the Inquisition. So usually, if you are familiar with Warhammer, the Inquisition is a very secretive organization that sort of runs the Imperium from behind as a secret sort of, fighting a secret war, basically. The Invisible War, as they call it. The Ecclesiarch of the Adeptus Ministorum. The Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Grand Provost Marshal of the Adeptus Arbites. The Adeptus Arbites or Arbites, however you want to pronounce them, they're basically the police. They are the police of the Warhammer of the Imperium. And then the Paternoval Envoy of the Navigators, which basically the Navigators is a whole other thing that I want to dive into one day because I love the Navigators. They're really cool. But the Navigators basically, and the whole sect of the Navigators are focused on guiding ships through space and the sort of upkeep of the Astronomicon, which is basically a beacon that allows people to see Terra from basically anywhere. And I say see as in like on a map, and travel back and forth between Imperial worlds. And then the Master of the Astronomicon, Astra Telepathica, the Master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, which falls into the Sisters of Silence we will get to. Then we have the Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum. So those are the Adeptus Terra. To preface, there has never been an individual in the Adeptus Terra who has held more than one seat. And if an individual holds 2 or more seats, like if he's in charge of the Administratum, sugar pie, honey bunch. Whatever you say, Zach. But if there's an individual that holds another seat, that's a problem because that's more power towards one or two administrations. So that brings me to the Age of Apostasy and the Reign of Blood. So, what is the Reign of Blood? What is the Age of Apostasy? Why is it a problem? So, the Age of Apostasy is a time in which, the Adeptus Administratum and the Adeptus Ministorum sort of clashed at heads. Sorry, that song stuck in my head. You're good, Zach. No worries. The Administratum and the Ecclesiarchy have been clashing for power for a little bit. And the Ecclesiarchy starts to become bigger and powerful. So much so that the Ecclesiarch of the Ecclesiarchy came to be viewed as speaking with the authority of the emperor himself. And he influenced every aspect of the governance of the Imperium. So he was basically the Pope. And how the Pope acts, or the Pope says that he speaks with the word of God, or he represents God. So the Pope, or the Ecclesiarch in this instance, it was inevitable that other great bureaucracies of the Imperium would eventually grow resentful of the Ecclesiarch and the Ecclesiarchy because of their growing power. So, the Adeptus Administratum, in particular, found its own powers greatly curtailed, for the Ministorum's tithes took precedence over its own raising of funds and resources, leaving little in the coffers to pay for the running of the secular components of the Imperium. The Administratum's political influence soon waned so far that the Ministorum was able to dictate policy in secular matters as well, which is a problem because the Administratum is supposed to be separate from the state religion, right? And the state religion got so powerful that they were able to dictate secular matters. And if you don't know what secular means, it's to be separate from the religion. Like, a secular government is not influenced by religion. So the Ministorum / Ecclesiarchy grew so powerful that they were able to dip their fingers into policy regarding secular matters and start influencing that, which is a big, big problem. That's really bad because then they can start putting more power into their corner. So the raising and deployment of armies, they were able to, the Administratum was able to do this normally. But then the Ecclesiarchy, which only had a standing military known as the Frateris Templar, and the Frateris Templar is literally just a bunch of pilgrims and willing volunteers that would serve the Ecclesiarchy as sort of pilgrims that would go to different worlds, sort of pacify worlds and defend parts of the Imperium. They were a very unorganized militia, the Frateris Templar. Or as you want to call, if you want to directly translate from Latin, it's Brotherhood or the Brother Templars. It's a fraternity, basically. So the Frateris Templar grows massive in size at this point, and as I said earlier, the Ministorum was able to dictate in policy in secular matters. They was raising deployment of armies, the prosecution of wars, the commitment of significant imperial resources, and the appointment of sector lords all fell under the effective control of the Ministorum. So they essentially basically took the administratum's job. So the administratum was just kind of sitting on its hands. In time, other institutions began to distrust the Ministorum's power, and the Adeptus Astartes and the Adeptus Mechanicus in particular became increasingly estranged from the Ministorum-dominated imperial government. So the Space Marines and the Adeptus Mechanicus started to be recognizing that the Ministorum was like gaining too much power, and they're like, hold the phone. This is a little strange. You guys are power juggling really, really quickly, and we are sort of being pushed out. Why? Right? And so the Adeptus Astartes and the Mechanicus start to get suspicious and start to feel a little curbed. So that is something you may know because it becomes important a little bit later. Anyway, so as if the situation could not get any worse, the ecclesiarchy is gaining so much power and sort of monopolizing the Imperium into their corner. Warp storms, like the entire Imperium was plunged into lots of warp storms, which if you don't know what a warp storm is, essentially it's like a space anomaly that interrupts travel, interstellar travel, and can cause a lot of damage to a world if it happens to position itself above a world. And so the phenomenon that cuts off vast swaths of the Imperium space from interstellar travel and communication increased by an order of magnitude. So the warp began to seethe with rolling energies which bled forth into real space, making travel between anything other than worlds within the same planetary system increasingly perilous. Central governance of worlds limited to periodic contact at the best of times entirely collapsed. So worlds that were so cut off from the Imperium to begin with, that had barely any communication, just completely collapsed because they had no support from the inner Imperium, no support from any of the stronger planets and more populous and resource heavy planets. So like a lot of worlds just went dark within like an instant, basically. And so the black ships, which we will talk about, of the Adeptus Telepathica were unable to get through this entire sort of warp storm, and entire populations fell to demonic incursion or enslaver domination. Civil war and anarchy beset the Imperium, with those planets that remained accessible being ruthlessly suppressed by the increasingly brutal Frateris Templars. So like I said earlier, the Frateris Templars are starting to basically enforce a martial law that is just becoming extremely oppressive and brutal. Seeing that their foes were tearing themselves apart, the myriad of enemies of humanity started to strike back. So, for example, the traitors and the heretics came forth from the Eye of Terror, using their own blasphemous sorceries to strike down planets, otherwise cut off from outside aid. Orcs traversed the warp in their ramshackle space hulks, uncaring where the tides of the Imperium regurgitated them and wreaking havoc in regions previously beyond their reach. And the Drukhari, the Dark Eldar, used their webway to freely navigate the galaxy and struck wherever they desired, dragging millions upon millions of captives screaming into their infernal realm of Kamara to suffer tortures and degradations beyond a sane man's imagination. The entire Imperium was practically gripped by an apocalyptic frenzy and doom and anarchy. Other than those descriptions of like doom and anarchy, the best I can do to describe the age of apostasy is mania, hysteria, and chaos. Utter, uncontrolled chaos on all facets. It was the worst time, one of the worst times to be alive in the Imperium, period. I mean, being alive in the Imperium, even outside of a crisis like this, fucking sucks, but this is even worse because you've got no protection. At least normally you have some. So, countless new sects sprung into being, many proclaiming that the God Emperor was enacting his final judgment upon mankind and that the end times were at hand. So basically, a bunch of sort of smaller religions started coming out of the woodwork and just being like, dude, we're being punished. We're being punished so hard for our sins. Which is not necessarily the case, but they believed that. So, no world was untouched by the anarchy, as whole populations rose up increasingly bizarre and extravagant acts of penance and self-flagellation. Anyone who dared attempt to reason with the doomsayers were declared heretics, and world after world tore themselves apart in an orgy of bloodletting and violent penance. So worlds literally destroyed themselves in hysteria that they were being punished by the Emperor. That's how bad it was, that planets destabilized themselves and mass executions, mass suicides, just orgies of violence and death started happening because people thought that was how they would earn forgiveness from the Emperor because everything was just going to shit. So now a lot of you may be thinking, great, this is just a downward spiral and it's never going to get better. And like, how can you salvage this? And that is true, because you can't salvage this, because in this instance, a new player comes onto the board, and it is even worse than what we've previously been experiencing. So, enter Goj Vandire. On this doom-laden stage stepped in the insane Goj Vandire. And I mean insane in the actual sense, like he was clinically insane. I'm gonna show you what Goj Vandire looks like, and you're gonna look at him, and I want to see what you guys think of this man. That's Goj Vandire. That is the 361st Master of the Administratum. A position that he had attained by ruthless application of bribes, threats, outright assassination, and he was a strident opponent to the Ministorum. So he was actually against the ecclesiarchy, which is strange, because what we're about to learn about him is contrary to the fact of that, but he was against the ecclesiarchy. However, Vandire plotted against it for many years, and he plotted his rise to power very, intricately. Shortly before his ascension to the rank of High Lord, Vandire brought about the selection of a man of his own choosing to lead the ecclesiarchy, ensuring that no one could stand before his subsequent rise. So basically what Goj Vandire did was he basically selected someone to run the other, powerhouse that is the Ministorum right now. He got someone to do that, someone in his pocket, in his thumb, and so that when he ascended to High Lord, he wouldn't have anyone that opposed him. He played the game. As confidence, and so here's the even me, Mom, I want Conrad Kurz. Mom, we got Conrad Kurz at home. I wouldn't even call him Conrad Kurz, because Conrad Kurz he took enjoyment in the destruction that he caused and the sort of depravity that he brought. Vandire wasn't focused on any of that. He was focused only on his own power and only on just gaining more power and continuing to live long enough to just do what he wanted. He didn't care about the subjects of the Imperium. He didn't care about how they were killed or how they were flayed alive like Conrad Kurz would. Conrad Kurz enjoyed flaying people alive. He enjoyed taking people apart, right? And he was very meticulous on how he did that. Goj Vandire couldn't give a shit about anyone other than himself. He looks like Conrad Kurz, I will say, but they are very different. So, what's even fucking crazier about the fact that he put this other man in power in order to be in charge of the ecclesiarchy is he put this man in power and then spoke shit about him so that his reputation and sort of confidence and just I'll read what I have in notes, but basically, as confidence in the new puppet ecclesiarch Paulus III plummeted due to his reputation for incompetence and venality, Goj Vandire made his move. So Goj Vandire put him in power, put Paulus III in power, and then slandered him intentionally so that he could take control of the ecclesiarchy. Because what he did was he orchestrated a coup d'etat on a man that he put in office, but he did it with the Astra Militarum officers under his control, who simply just executed Paulus outright, claiming that his behavior proved to be that of a heretic, and he was made unfit for his office. So he put him in his office, he manipulated him, and then he made everyone believe that he was unfit for office, and then he executed him. That's what Goj Van Dyer did. And so then Goj Van Dyer, having nobody oppose him, he then used the support of the various ministerium cardinals that he had bribed and otherwise brought under his influence to immediately call a conclave that selected him as the new ecclesiarch. So now he is the master of the administratum, and he is the, leader of the ecclesiarchy. He is the new ecclesiarch. He holds 2 seats of power now. And not only does he hold one of the most powerful organizations, which is the administratum, but now he holds the currently most powerful organization at this period in time, which is the ecclesiarchy. As I told you earlier, the ecclesiarchy was gaining so much power and just getting bigger and bigger, and now he is in charge of both of those organizations, specifically those 2 organizations that were butting heads. They no longer butt heads now because he's in charge of both of them, meaning that he just consolidates all of the administratum into the ecclesiarchy. So the administratum essentially ceases to exist when he's in charge, and it's just the ecclesiarchy. So, once he assumed these dual roles, he became the most powerful person in the Imperium, next to the Emperor. Van Dyer succeeded ultimately in driving the Imperium into the bitterest period of civil war and rebellion it had known since the Horus Heresy. And if you're familiar with the Horus Heresy, which was one of the worst times, if not the worst time in the Imperium, this was a close second. And this era of Age of Apostasy has then quickly turned into what other people have dubbed the Reign of Blood. Goj Van Dyer's Reign of Blood. So, under Goj Van Dyer's tyrannical rule, he, had millions of agents across the galaxy giving him information and telling him about important things and keeping him updated. One of those agents came to him, and they told him about a group of warrior women on this planet of San Leor, an agri-world, so it's a world of agriculture, and it's a group of ascetic warrior women and their utter dedication to the Emperor. They also made note of their skills of arms and how good they were in combat. So, Van Dyer decided that he would make a formal visit to the secluded convent of the Daughters of the Emperor. That was the name of their organization at the time. They called themselves the Daughters of the Emperor. The first that the inhabitants of San Leor knew about the state visit by the man who was basically the de facto leader of the Imperium was when several 100,000 of his retainers marched into their simple towns and demanded that they show the High Lord the utmost devotion on pain of death. Images of the vast processions were recorded by spy lenses of hundreds of serval skulls and disseminated across every world in the Imperium not cut off by the raging warp storms. The image of the High Lord Van Dyer being welcomed to San Leor became a staple of the ecclesiarchy's propaganda. When at last the vast cavalcade reached the gates of the convent in which the Daughters of the Emperor resided, Van Dyer found them barred and closed. The voice of the gatekeeper informed the High Lord that the Daughters of the Emperor recognized only the authority of the God Emperor himself. So he was not let in. He was not granted audience with these women because they didn't recognize his power. They didn't recognize the fact that, they only recognized the Emperor's power. So Van Dyer's attendants cringed in anticipation, believing that Van Dyer would go into an explosive rage, but he didn't. Uncharacteristically of Van Dyer, he remained calm. In a serene manner, Van Dyer told the gatekeeper that he would prove that he spoke with the authority of the Emperor himself, and if they would allow him to enter their convent with but a small bodyguard. The Daughters of the Emperor acceded to Van Dyer's request, and the High Lord and a small group of his retainers were led into the central courtyard. There, Van Dyer announced sort of what he planned to do to show them that he spoke with the word of the Emperor. He would prove to them that the Emperor's grace was upon him and that should he lie, he would be slain. So Vandire brandished his Rosarius. Now I'm going to take a little tangent. A Rosarius is a specific device that members of the ecclesiarchy carry. Typically, if you're familiar with religion, it would be like a cross, or it'd be sort of like a book or a rosary, whatever you want to call it. It is a sort of trinket that you would carry around that signifies your faith. Now, in the Warhammer universe, typically Rosarius have special properties, such as being able to create a field generator or a shield, like a personal shield. That's typically what a Rosarius has. It's something that protects you from harm. The sisters or the daughters of the Emperor do not know this. They have never seen a Rosarius in their life, so they do not know that what Vandire is showing them is basically a get-out-of-jail-free card. They don't know that, and he was banking on that. He was hoping that the daughters of the Emperor did not know what he was holding, because then what he did was he instructed his guard to shoot him. Vandire brandished the Rosarius and ordered one of his bodyguards to shoot him. The man was dumbfounded and fearful of harming his master, but Vandire insisted, forcing his trembling hand to stillness. The guard aimed his last pistol straight at Vandire's heart and fired. Vandire was consumed in a blinding white light, and when the vision of the gathered witnesses had cleared, they saw that he stood unharmed before them. All in the courtyard went down upon their knees, and the daughters of the Emperor proclaimed their fealty to High Lord Vandire. In truth, Vandire had tricked them, gambling that they would have never seen a Rosarius before. It was the energy field projected by the generator within the ornate medallion that had turned the guard's shot, and not the protection of the Emperor. So he lied. He lied to the daughters of the Emperor, saying that he was protected by this, the light of the Emperor, and thus convinced the daughters of the Emperor that they would be, he was guided and protected by the Emperor. And therefore, they immediately swore complete fealty and loyalty to him, because he basically, to them, was the Emperor now. And so, from then on, the daughters of the Emperor promised themselves to serve their new master, and at his word, changed their name of their order to the Brides of the Emperor. Now, if you're me, and you hear Brides of the Emperor, from daughters to brides, from this man right here, this fucking creep, and you hear that, oh yes, we're going to change the organization to the Brides of the Emperor, I immediately am unnerved. Why would you change them to that? That's really strange, considering they see you as the Emperor right now. It's suspicious. It's suspicious as fuck. Why would you call them that? So he has labeled them the Brides of the Emperor, and the sisters became Vandire's personal bodyguard, and their skill at arms was enhanced by training in the finest weapons and armor the High Lord could provide. The Brides of the Emperor would stand at Vandire's side wherever he went, and they were both his bodyguards and his executioners. Words of their dedication spread across the worlds of the Imperium, and none who entered the High Lord's presence would so much as look at him askance under the silent, watchful gaze of the Brides of the Emperor. So yeah, it's very strange. So I'm going to talk, before we get sort of the climax of this story here, I'm going to talk a little bit about why the Sisters of Battle and Brides of the Emperor and then soon Sisters of Battle are very special. So in the Imperium, there's a few things you need to understand. There are super soldiers, and then there are the common men and women of the Imperium. The Adeptus Astartes are Space Marines, and Space Marines are genetically enhanced transhuman super soldiers. They are the best of the best, without a doubt. They are augmented to have greater reflexes, strength, etc. They are almost unstoppable killing machines, if not already unstoppable killing machines. The Sisters of Battle are not augmented humans. They are normal women. They are normal human women that have trained to the peak capability that a human can ever reach. So they are as strong as a human can be, they're as fast as a human can be, and they are, as smart as a human can be. Sisters of Battle train very vigorously to be peak human, as they believe the Emperor has intended, and they do not have augments. And so what I'm about to tell you is referred to as the Terran Crusade. And what happened is the Space Marines and the Adeptus Mechanicus and the other organizations of the Imperium started to realize that Gode Vandire was securing a lot of power. Yeah, who needs to be modified? Just peak woman being badass. Exactly. I will. You're gonna like, if you like what you're hearing already about them, you're gonna like even more what I'm about to tell you. But the Terran Crusade happens, in which the Imperium basically turns on Vandire, and because there's one preacher and his name is Sebastian Thor, he swayed many worlds against Vandire because he was like, Vandire is securing power and becoming a heretic, becoming a despot, becoming a tyrant. And so the Space Marines, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and other organizations within the Imperium join Sebastian Thor in his crusade against Vandire. And eventually that crusade arrives on Earth, aka Terra, which is where the seat of power of the Imperium is. Not only the Emperor resides there, but also the palace in which the Adeptus Ministorum is located. So, the Space Marines, consisting of the Black Templars, Imperial Fists, Soul Drinkers, and a few other chapters, they basically launch an attack on Earth against Gode Vandire. Now, at this point in time, the Space Marines have sort of been relaxed and not really paying attention to Vandire and what he's been doing. But the moment they make contact with Vandire's forces on Terra, they are immediately met with the Sisters of Battle. Warrior women armed in power armor, which it's important to note, Space Marines wear power armor. And power armor is nigh impenetrable. Like, it's strong. So Space Marines are usually the only people in the Imperium that are given power armor. But all of these Sisters of Battle, all of these women had power armor. Now, normal human beings, right? Normal human beings do not stand a chance against Space Marines. Space Marines blitz pretty much every normal human they encounter. The Sisters of Battle, and by the way, these Space Marine chapters that are facing the Sisters of Battle in this instance are some of the best, like, well-trained, powerful chapters in the Imperium. Like, the Imperial Fist have been around since the founding of the Imperium. So, the Space Marines come down and they start fighting the Sisters of Battle. And eventually the Sisters of Battle hold them in a standstill. Like, the Sisters of Battle are able to stop the Space Marines from gaining any ground, and it becomes a stalemate for several months. Normal human women who have trained, and gained all this armor and equipment are capable of fighting Space Marines. Fighting Space Marines so effectively that they hold them to a standstill. That's impressive and crazy to think about, because normal humans can't do this with Space Marines. And also, Space Marines are just better. They are absolutely better than the Sisters of Battle. They have better training. They live longer. They live for 500,000 of years. Right? And these warrior women are giving them a run for their money, which is crazy to think about. I'm still at work, but hi, I hope stream is good. Hi, Valix, welcome in. W for women. Absolutely. They're about to get so much cooler. Welcome in, Valix. It's good seeing you. And I hope work is, not super tiresome. But yeah, so they're able to hold their own against the Imperium, specifically the Space Marines. It takes the Custodes, and specifically one Custodes, which his name is Longinus. So if you don't know who the Custodes are, basically they're better than Space Marines. They are genetic descendants of the Emperor himself, like molded from his genes, and there's only 10,000 of them, and they are the Emperor's personal bodyguards. They are better than Space Marines in every way. The Custodes finally step in, because they've just been sitting around watching all of this unfold. They decide to step in, and Longinus, one of the orators / I believe I have it here. Let's see here. Yeah, Centurion Longinus of the Adeptus Custodes Praetorian Guard. Basically, he involves himself in this conflict, and he makes contact with Alicia Dominica. Now, Alicia Dominica, we love Alicia Dominica. She is, let's see if we can get an image of her. She is the current leader of the Brides of the Emperor. It's actually a great image of her because it's really sad. So, Saint Alicia Dominica is a very prominent figure in figure in the Adeptus Sororitas history. But she and several of her sisters were leading the Sisters of Battle during this time. So what happens is Longinus meets with her, and like I said before, the Adeptus Custodes are the best of the best. They're better than Space Marines. They are demigods. They're basically demigods, right? He meets with them, and there's about, I believe it's 7 Sisters of Battle. All of them have names. I'm not going to go with their names now. We'll talk about them later. But Saint Alicia, or just Alicia Dominica, is one of them at this point. So she immediately challenges Longinus to battle, and Longinus. Now, there's a debate. There's a debate in the Warhammer universe / community whether Longinus let them live or he was actually outmatched. Because what proceeded to happen is Longinus dueled these 7 sisters in battle for several hours. They fought. Nobody losing or winning. It was a stalemate between the Adeptus Custodes, which are, I'll get an image of them too. They are the bodyguards of the Emperor himself. These guys, which are, by the way, they're like 12 feet tall, whereas normal Sisters of Battle are just like average human height. So he's dueling Alicia Dominica and her sisters for several hours. Now, a lot of people like to believe that duel, he was not being serious. He wasn't actually like trying to kill them or fight them, which is very reasonable to assume, considering that he wasn't trying to kill them or fight them. He was trying to talk them down. Because after this battle, 6-hour plus battle, right, he leads them into the Sanctorum Imperialis, which is where the Emperor sits, right? Nobody knows what happened in there. Nobody knows what was said, what was learned. All we know is that after Longinus led them into the Sanctum Imperialis, the Sisters of Battle, Alicia Dominica, and her sisters exited it with stark white hair, like their hair was like bleached white, and they had very thinly veiled fury on their eyes and in their expressions. They were pissed. Whatever Longinus told them, whatever Longinus or the Emperor, people assume the Emperor communicated with them, whatever the Emperor told them, they were fucking pissed. And all of that anger and all of that rage was pointed towards Goj Vandire. And so the Sisters of Battle stopped fighting the Space Marines. And they stopped fighting the people that were attacking them, and they all march on Goj Vandire's palace. And Alicia Dominica and her sisters enter Goj Vandire's room, and in his room, Goj Vandire is just writing on some paper, just minding his own fucking business. And Alicia Dominica is like, Goj Vandire, you are charged with heresy, you are charged with disposition of the Imperium, its oppression, and you will be condemned, and you will be executed for your crimes. And I kid you not, Goj Vandire turns, and his final words to Alicia Dominica were, I don't have time to die, I'm too busy. And then she cuts his head off. And that thus ends the Reign of Blood with that execution there. Goj Vandire is killed by Alicia Dominica, and then after that instance, the Sisters of Battle, wild last words, he's too busy to die. The Sisters of Battle thus then become the Sisters of Battle, like officially named thus. So, a few important things to note about them at this point. They essentially helped a man rise to power and corrupt the Imperium, which they believe is a permanent stain on their honor. And so the Administratum basically rules a new decree, it's called the Passive Decree, in which the ecclesiarchy cannot have a military. And the specific words that the decree is that the ecclesiarchy, or here's the actual quote, Let the word of the emperor be heard once more. Wherever men gather and look upwards into the star, let them know that the emperor looks back upon them. From the golden throne, wherever in his benighted galaxy they may reside. So in the wake of his downfall, Goj Van Dyers, the Fraterus Templar was disbanded, and the Sisters of Battle were disbanded under the terms of the so-called Decree Passive, which forbade the Adeptus Ministorum from controlling any men under arms. Never again would the ecclesiarchy threaten the continued rule of the administratum. The brides, after resuming their original title of daughter of the emperor, were all at a loss as to what their purpose should be after this event. So basically, the passive decree outlawed the ecclesiarchy from having men under arms. Now, it's very important that you take note in the fact that it says men under arms. It doesn't say anything about women. So, the Sisters of Battle have discovered this, and the ecclesiarchy discovers this. They took the opportunity to recruit and indoctrinate them into the ranks of the Ministerium's military forces, due to their all-female membership. The Daughters of the Emperor did not technically break the ban, and thus the ecclesiarchy was able to circumvent the decree passive's strictures, even if the spirit of Thor's decree was rather blatantly disregarded. So they still get to exist. This newly formed military force was named the Orders Militant of the Adeptus Sororitas. The sisterhood became true defenders of the faith and a very physical reminder of the power of the ecclesiarchy, trained to the highest levels possible for normal humans and possessed of a phenomenal faith in the God Emperor himself. The sisters would go on to engage in wars of faith, bringing the light of the Emperor to parts of the galaxy that had fallen into darkness. During the first years of the sisterhood's existence, Alicia Dominica, who founded the orders at Thor's behest, led wars of faith against the alien invaders that had exploited the Imperium weakness during the reign of Bud. Sylvana, Mina, Lucia, Catherine, and Arabella, those sisters who had joined her before the Golden Throne, accompanied Dominica. Under their combined leadership, the sororitas were filled with a righteousness of purpose that the Imperium had not witnessed since the legendary days of the Great Crusade. Countless enemies fell as the armies of the sororitas brought the divine judgment of the ecclesiarchy to the farthest corners of the galaxy, and to this day the Sisters of Battle have stood as faithful and loyal defenders of the ecclesiarchy and the Imperium. So, they're fucking badass. They are awesome. We're gonna look at some images of them because they are, once again, they're my favorite faction in all of Warhammer. And for obvious reason, because they're fucking cool. And they have some pretty cool aspects to them. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the cool things that they encompass. So let's see here. They really like fire, as you could probably tell by a lot of these. Like, this is an entire fucking backpack that she's wearing, which is insane. But this is the power. So the example of the power armor that they wield. They also wield bolters like the Space Marines do. They also like using melta-guns. They have these things called Seraphim, which are basically flying Sisters of Battle with jetpacks, and they fly around and they're super cool. There is other sister orders that have different color schemes, which are really cool. We're not going to talk about the individual orders today. We're just talking about the Sisters of Battle as a whole. But one day we will deep dive on these orders and stuff like that. But they are so cool. And I want to show you guys some cool little clips and videos of them, because I honestly want you guys to get immersed with how badass the sisters can be. Let's just go to YouTube. There you go. I don't know if it's gonna let me play because it's got, what's it called, ad break stuff. Okay, hold on. So this I'll show you guys after the ads come in, but this trailer thing that I'm going to show you is actually from a mobile game, and it's a pretty shitty mobile game, but the cinematic trailer for it was pretty cool. So we're going to get into that in just a moment. I am going to take a sip of water though, because it's starting to get hot in my room. Okay. Ads should be starting in just a second. And if you guys have gotten through the ads already, just let me know and I can get back to the video. Some other cool things about them too is miracles and like acts of faith are real in this universe. A lot of people like to dispute whether they are or not, whether God can affect shit. But like the Emperor is a psychic entity of extreme power. He is able to influence things going on in the galaxy, even if his physical body is not around to do it. His mind can do it. And there are plenty of instances where sisters of battle have been fighting and miracles have happened plenty of times. I'm talking like fucking, a sister is shot fatally by a bullet, but by some miracle she survives, or that bullet is deflected before it hits her. Right? It's a miracle of the Emperor. Or a great example is the living saints. So there are times in which sisters of battle and other people within the Imperium will die a very valorous, martyrdom of a death that is seen as like a martyr or like a great sacrifice. And then in that instance of their sacrifice, they are resurrected and become these angels, essentially. Become like, angel wings flying, like heavenly powers, and they, are resurrected as living saints. There is no current explanation for why that happens other than the Emperor is quite literally reviving them. Some people believe it's a psychic phenomenon, while others, others aren't sure what it is. But what they are sure of is that it happens, and it is not some sort of fluke. Like, clearly faith and sort of believing it so intensely affects the actual physical space around you. So much so, I mean, it's something the Emperor tried to avoid happening. He didn't want people to worship him as a god, but in his apparent death / ascension to the Golden Throne, he wasn't able to dispute it. He wasn't able to dispute whether he was a god or not because he physically couldn't. He was sitting on the throne. He's practically dead. So the ecclesiarchy is formed because of that, because they are able to sort of, without a doubt, sort of acclaim that the Emperor is a god. And nobody says that he isn't. And so thus this widespread faith, which is now referred to as the Imperial Faith or the Imperial Creed, which is contrary to the Imperial Truth, which the Imperial Truth is the fact that the Emperor is not a god. But the Imperial Creed is the belief that the Emperor is a god. So the Imperial Truth has sort of been pushed away, and the Imperial Creed has taken its place. Because it is the truth of the matter that the Emperor is not a god. But people are unwilling to accept that. And they believe it is heresy to think that he is not a god. And heresy is a thing that is thrown about a lot in Warhammer. And a lot of people who are new to the Warhammer universe will just start spouting heresy, 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 heresy this, heresy that. But it's a lot less black and white than you may seem. Often the most puritanical, the most, zealotry, people who hold a lot of zealotry and puritanical beliefs in their heart are often very quick to label people as heretics, which then falls under the whole psychology of bias and sort of perception of another person, because they may be doing something that you dislike, but it's not actually heretical, but you are so pious and so sort of brainwashed to believe that it is, that basic sort of necessities and like, striking out for yourself is seen as heretical and therefore they must be punished. That kind of stuff. So now that you guys are back, we can get with the video and see some cool sort of sister of battle moments. Got some Space Marines. Fighting some Chaos Space Marines. Good old Sister of Battle. She's able to stand up to a Space Marine, which is just sick as fuck. Look at her go. So let's look at that for a second and just sort of realize, like, there are plenty. This is where I'm going to sort of get into sort of controversy, but there are a lot of people who don't really understand the lore and are like, why can't there be female Space Marines? Why can't we have sort of inclusion and female Space Marines and custodies and stuff like that? And I'm like, they don't realize that we have that already. We have that. The Sisters of Battle, the Sisters of Silence, and then many other warrior women in the Warhammer universe that are on par, if not better, than those pre-existing things. They don't know about those things. And even when you tell them, they can't accept it because it's not as cool as a Space Marine. And I'm like, dude, I don't know if you didn't, like, I don't know if you just saw what I just saw, but that was fucking awesome. That Sister of Battle was dancing around a Space Marine, practically fucking giving him a run for his money. She was getting licks on him too, and he was fucking grabbing her, and he was, like manhandling her, but she was shrugging it off like nothing. Like, and it's just like the whole belief that like we need to have female Space Marines or we need to have female custodies when the Sisters of Battle and the Sisters of Silence are right there just boggles my mind why people complain about it. And for no other reason than to just make a hubbub about things, because we have the cool badass women in this universe, and they are some of the coolest in just any fiction. Some of the things that I will tell you about them as we continue are even cooler. Yeah, they're right in front of people and they can't see it. They can't because people want to be fair, the Space Marines are the poster child of Warhammer. They are the most popular thing in Warhammer. So of course, people who want to push diversity inclusion are going to be like, make the Space Marines female, make some of them female. Not how you do it. I mean, I'm not going to get too much into it, but for example, the Adeptus Custodes, the big golden guys, an author recently wrote down that there has also been female custodies, and the entire Warhammer community was like, what? That's ridiculous, because you have told us in previous publications that there are no female custodies, and it's always been men because the Emperor created them in his image. So, and then in the most recent like Warhammer animations and the Tides animations, there was a female custodies and people were pissed about it. And don't get me wrong, she was really cool, but why? It wasn't necessary to do that. It didn't add anything or take anything necessarily to the Warhammer universe that you made it a woman, but you could have just made that episode about the Sisters of Silence, because the Sisters of Silence are in that episode and they're arguably cooler than the custodian that's a woman in that episode. I'm going to show you clips from it when we talk about the Sisters of Silence. And like, it's just, I don't know, it's completely unnecessary to make them women, especially after pre-established lore has, sort of dictated that isn't the case. Anyway, next bit. Also, if you recognize that voice actor, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3 before, that's the voice actor for Minthara. All I'm saying is I want a Sister of Battle to step on me like that. Come on. First of all, can I tell you about the Necrons? Because the Necrons is what she's fighting in this instance. They are basically undying Terminators, and typically they give Space Marines a run for their money, and she's holding her own against Necrons. And she also just took a hit to the face and survived. And this is a normal human woman, by the way. No augments, no upgrades, just armor and training. And then an actual miracle happens and she fucking heals herself. And there, of course, is your obligatory Space Marine. And then here come the Sisters of Battle once again. I'm sorry, man, but I fucking love Warhammer and I love the Sisters of Battle. They're my fucking favorite. Like, isn't that cool? Like, aren't they so cool? Like, the Space Marines are cool, don't get me wrong. But the Sisters of Battle, man, they're so fucking cool. And then here, we got more too. We've got this from Pariah Nexus as well. So Pariah Nexus is sort of a continuation of that trailer you just saw as well. Warning though, it is going to get a bit graphic. So this is the Warhammer universe as well, so just be reminded that it is graphic. Even like being stabbed very violently by this giant metal machine, she is still just able to have a conversation with this creature. Like even in death, man, she just fucking is just like pure pain, pure hate and spite. And I love it. I think they're so fucking cool. There's plenty of other scenes as well from that show as well where they're really fucking cool. But yeah, Sisters of Battle, love them. They're awesome. They are super cool. They're my favorite faction. There is I don't have necessarily enough time to deep dive on like some of the very specific stuff about them, like their different units and stuff like that. But I'm giving you a basic general overview of what they're like. Because we're going to move into talking about these Sisters of Silence now, because the Sisters of Silence are also really cool, and it's a little bit longer of a talk that we're going to have about them. So let's get some Sisters of Silence art up as well. So the Sisters of Silence, they look like this typically, and as you can tell by their names, they don't speak. They are completely silent, and they actually speak in sign language. And I'm going to show you a couple clips of them from one of the Warhammer TV shows that it shows how cool they are, especially when it comes to the sign language as well as the fighting, because they are basically the female variants of the Custodes, but they have a few really cool things about them, and which is why it angers me that they decided to say that, hey, there are female Custodes out there, when that's like why the Sisters of Silence exist. Sisters of Silence exist. There you go. Bro, look at her go. We are going to sort of skip this Custodes part because we're not talking about the Custodes. Are we also allowed to discuss some battle reports? When we talk about Warhammer Wednesday, we let's talk about the tabletop stuff, because I don't really do the tabletop stuff, but the battle reports we will eventually do at some point. I don't really have a battle report prepared right now, so unfortunately no. But we will at some point next time we do it. So a little bit of an example of, like what that whole sort of episode was about. So the Sisters of Silence, a little bit, I'm not going to go too deep into like the very fine details of them, but in order to understand them, you need to understand what the warp is, right? So the warp, as I have written down here, and I'm going to go back to an image of the Sisters of Silence for you guys because I want to show you what they look like. There's another example of them. The Sisters of Silence are psychic nulls, and that comes into play in a little bit. But the warp is basically the antithesis to reality. It's everything and nothing. It's hell and heaven. It's where the soul goes when you die. All beings are connected to it. Psychers are fueled by the warp, taking a chunk of the warp each time they use their powers. Black ships, which is what we're going to talk about soon, carry psychers to Earth for the Great Psyker Tithe, as well as they do it through the warp, etc. But it's a dangerous and complicated place. Demons, chaos gods, and unrivaled power all come from the warp. The Emperor, the master of mankind, has godlike powers, and he has a strong connection to the warp. And he formed the Custodes and the Sisters of Silence, and those are the talons of the Emperor. The Custodes, they're direct genetic sons of the Emperor, all 10,000 of them. Staunch defenders of the Imperial Palace and the Emperor work alongside the Sisters of Silence for all duties regarding the Emperor's longevity. So, that out of the way, you understand what the warp is, right? It's the antithesis to reality. You've got real space and then you've got the warp. Real space is everything that we can physically sort of manipulate and, sort of interact with. And then the warp is sort of the mind, like the mind space and the sort of like soul space where the souls go and stuff like that. And your emotions influence the warp. So psychers are humans or creatures born with sort of the ability to take parts of the warp and manipulate it and use it to influence themselves. Whether that be giving you power, like for example, a psyker, if strong enough, can manipulate the warp and shoot lightning from his fingertips or from a staff, or they can hurl fireballs, or they can create a tornado. Those kind of stuff it's magic. It's basically magic if you want to like really boil it down. But it's through the mind, right? And the mind is a very vulnerable place in the Warhammer universe. It is what influences how the Chaos Gods sort of interact with the people. And a great example, if your mind is not well trained or strong enough and you start using psyker powers, a demon could just straight up spawn out of your head. Like your head will explode and a fucking demon will be there. Because you basically were tapping into the warp, opening a gateway between the two planes of reality, and you let a demon through. Unintentionally most of the times. But so being a psyker is a very dangerous existence. And so the Sisters of Silence were created to hunt down rogue psychers and dangerous psychers and people who would use their psychic powers for evil. And as well on top of gathering psychers for the Great Psyker Tithe. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and some people do, but in the Imperium, the Emperor, he sits upon the Golden Throne and he's dying. In order to keep him alive, thousands of psychers, human psychers, are sacrificed, their souls are sacrificed to him every single day. And in order to get those people for this sort of sacrifice, they need to collect them somehow. And the Sisters of Silence are in charge of that. They're in charge of going on these ships called the Black Ships and collecting psychers. As you saw in that video, all of those people that were running away from those Tyranids, from those bug-looking creatures, they were psychers that were being collected for the Black Ship in order to be brought to Terra for their sacrifice, or to be evaluated, or to be disposed of. Regardless, the Black Ships carry psychers. That's what's important. Now, from what I've told you about psychers, it'd be natural to assume that it's extremely dangerous to be around a psycher. Femboy Satan, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. That's crazy that that's your user. That is crazy, but welcome in. So you naturally assume that being around a psyker is dangerous, and it is. But the Sisters of Silence don't have to worry about that because they are what is known as psychic nulls. Now, if you don't know what it is, aren't psychers used for doors for not all the time, but typically what will happen is a psyker who is unable to control their powers, Femboy, will unintentionally open a doorway between the warp and their reality, and a demon will call through it, typically. Now, there are instances in which organizations and evildoers and bad people have taken psychers and basically used them as doors for demons, like literally just putting them on a pedestal, opening them up, and just letting their mind go haywire as it creates a sort of rift/portal to the warp, and demons just crawl out, right? There are many many different instances of that happening, as well as being a demon host. You can be possessed by demons if you're a psyker. Being a psyker is not fun. It is the worst thing. It gives you a lot of power, yes, but if you don't know how to control that power, which you don't, immediately when you are born a psyker, it doesn't manifest until you're at least 7 years old, and then your psychic awakening happens, and it's like Superman in his first time on Earth. All of this information slash, stimulation and stimuli and sort of everything. If the Emperor can't control he can absolutely control his psychic might, but if he somehow lost his grip on his control of his abilities, it would be a huge problem. He's the only reason that the Astronomicon is still powered because of his psychic power. If he lost control, the Imperium would be in darkness. But yeah, so like at your psychic awakening, you get this sort of great, bestowing of power upon you, but you don't know how to control it. Many times, psychers will get their psychic awakening like when they're really young, and they might accidentally murder their entire family because they don't know how to control their powers. And they're freaking out because their mind fucking hurts, and demons are talking to them, and actual hell, space hell. Yeah, it's more of a curse than a blessing, exactly. It can be useful. The thing is, the really ironic thing about being a psyker is that most of the most important jobs, it is space hell. The warp is essentially space hell, except it's influenced by your emotions. It's both the antithesis to reality and the ultimate reality. It has a multitude of names, Femboy. I'm simplifying it down for people who don't understand. The warp, as I said earlier, is the antithesis to reality. It's everything and nothing. It's hell, it's heaven. It's where the soul goes. It's where beings are connected, such as psychers, as well as the emotions sort of influence the landscape that happens there. Base emotions fuel the chaos gods, and thus the chaos gods then warp and manipulate the reality of the warp. It's the place. It's where all things go that aren't physical. Everything happens in the warp. Absolutely. It's everything and nothing, because you've got real space and then you've got the warp, and the warp is a different reality entirely. It's not physical. It's not a physical place that you can walk in, traverse, unless you make it that way. For example, what psychers do, when psychers use their power, they quite literally use their mind to go into the warp and to grab a space of it and then bring that outwards. You're essentially taking chunks. Think of like cotton candy, right? You've got a ball of cotton candy and you reach out and you grab it and you whip off a piece of that cotton candy, and now it's yours. That's how psychers essentially use their power. They take a sort of space of the warp and they make it their own. Buns, welcome in. Good seeing you. How you doing? What's going on? How's my favorite bunny doing? Yeah, warp is just when you try to make one thing to do everything. Yeah, it's sort of the all-purpose sort of area for things, I suppose. I am good. I'm doing good. I'm doing some good old Warhammer Wednesday, as I do each Wednesday, and I'm having a blast. We are talking about the crazy psyker stuff. But yeah, so orc psychers end up blowing themselves up most of the time, I'm guessing. So the thing is about orc psychers is they don't really understand that it's like psyker stuff. So would you say that they take a bit of the warp to do stuff, hence why they light up in the... Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to get into that as well. For orc psychers first, though, orc magic / orc psyker abilities are very strange because they don't have... You are my favorite buddy. I said bunny dits. You are my favorite buddy. You know I love you, bud. Well, orc psychers are strange because they don't have necessarily a patron deity as strong as the chaos gods, but they still take the warp. It's hair flip. It's collectivism for the orcs. The orcs have a collective intelligence and / collective sort of belief that influences the warp and allows their things to happen. However, it does happen quite frequently that a weird boy, which are the orcs that are psychers, they believe in order to be stronger that they have to physically expose their minds to the warp, so they cut open their heads and their brains are just sticking out because they think that's how they get more warp power. And orcs orc psychers typically overload themselves with warp power and the energy of the green, as they call it, and will typically explode as well. But that doesn't happen all the time. It's orc logic. It's orc culture. But yeah. So to what you said, Code. So would you say that they take a bit of the warp to do stuff? Hence the light up in the warp. So when a psyker uses their power, and as I said, it's like they're grabbing a piece of the warp and making it their own. Everything in the warp that is a predatory warp creatures, such as demons, which feed off of emotion and feed off of the use of the warp, will see that because a place of their reality is quite literally being taken. It's like, think about it this way. It's like a door, right? And let's say you're in a room. Does the warp have plants? No, the warp doesn't have anything physically unless whoever has enough power can physically alter the warp. For example, a really powerful psyker like Kaldor Drago, the Grandmaster of the Grey Knights, or one of the Grandmasters, when he enters the warp, he thinks up what he's encountering, such as like the ground beneath his feet. If he needs to walk somewhere in the warp, he wills it into existence. So if you want a flower in the warp, you just got to think hard enough, basically. But think of when you grab a piece of the warp as entering through a door, right? And behind that door is a room, and in that room there are demons in there, right? But that room, its light is off, right? Like it's dark in that room, and the demons are just sitting there in the darkness, not noticing you. The moment you open that door, that light turns on because it's fucking motion sensitive, right? And now everything can see you because you opened the door. You open the door in the warp, and this light turns on, and all the demons in that room now know where you are. And immediately, they're gunning for you. Maybe I could manifest a girlfriend in the warp. I would not recommend doing that, because this is something that people will eventually understand about the warp the more you explain it to them. But basically, just turn the light outside off before opening the door. That doesn't work at all, actually, because it's not your light that they're going for. It's their light that you've turned on when you come in. So I don't recommend manifesting a girlfriend in the warp, because here's the thing. The warp is the pure manifestation of those emotions, feelings, and sort of desires, right? So if you were to manifest a girlfriend or manifest something in the warp, it would be the pure sort of aspect of it, which is, in the Warhammer logic, is typically not great. Typically, the pure manifestation of an emotion is utter terror and utter chaos and utter fucking, like, just fear. It's not, looking upon these manifestations of these emotions is not something you want to do as a normal human. You will not be able to understand it. So, pure happiness, pure anything is indescribable when it comes to the warp. What if that manifests that? You'd probably meet Nurgle, because Nurgle has an aspect. The Chaos Gods, we're not going to get into the Chaos Gods. We're just setting what the warp is before we get into the Sisters of Silence. But the Chaos Gods have multiple facets. For example, Nurgle represents death, and sort of like plagues and other aspects of death. But he also represents rebirth, life, happiness, and beauty. So each Chaos God's got its half and half sort of situation there. So if you tried to manifest pure happiness, typically what happens when you manifest those pure emotions is they get twisted, right? In your pursuit of pure happiness, it gets twisted into something deranged and different from what you intended, because along that path of manifestation, you've changed. Manifesting a spoon in the warp, new item, the spoon. Yes. Sorry about the railroading. It's just interesting to hear about the warp, because I never really... The lore of the warp is intrinsically cosmic horror. It is meant to be cosmic horror. It's meant to be eldritch horror. It's meant to be indescribable. And you're okay. Don't worry about the derailing. It's fine. Because it is actually a good primer for about what we're about to talk about. But yeah, the warp is indescribable. It is a place that is manipulated out of our reality by our emotions, by our feelings, and by the many different factors that, facilitate life. So, what should you do if you find a guy living peacefully in the warp? Turn the other way. Because if he is capable of living peaceful in the warp, then he must be the strongest fucking person in the universe. because nobody's fucking with him. If nobody's fucking with you in the warp, then that tells you that nothing wants to fuck with you because you're too powerful. You're too scary for something to roll up. Because if that wasn't the case, you'd have demons swarming you. You'd have, temptation and otherworldly entities fucking coming in to mess with your mind. If you're fucking chilling, farming inside the warp, living on your little cottage in this weird fucking space plane, yeah, like you clearly are either two things: not important enough to be of a concern, or an absolute concern, and they don't want to fuck with you. Yeah, I mean, I hope he's nice, but I would just not. I would not engage with that man, because that man would be the most terrible, most dangerous person in all existence and non-existence. But yeah, so now that you understand the warp, we're going to talk about the Sisters of Silence and why they're important. So like I said, they gather psychers. Now that's a dangerous job. And so the Sisters of Silence are all psychic nulls. And what that means is they are completely immune to psychic temptation, power, manipulation, and the warp in general. They do not get affected by it. And I'm not even just talking like in the mind. If a psyker were to throw a fireball at a Sister of Silence, it would do nothing to her. No, the Sisters of Silence can't speak. They speak in sign language. They take a vow of silence and they don't speak. They do sign language though. But yeah, so the Sisters of Silence, they cannot be physically affected or mentally affected by psychers or the warp. They are soulless. And that's the reason why they're nulls, is because they do not have a soul. They are a body without a soul, which is strange. They are known as anathemas to the concept of souls. So some of their names are the Silent Sisterhood, the Witch Seekers, the Pale Scourge, the Soulless Ones, Null Maidens, the Irene, Daughters of the Abyss, the Department Investigates. They are a female order of Imperial Witch Hunters and soulless psychic nulls tasked with hunting down renegade psychers and other psychic threats across the galaxy. They also help reinforce the Imperium's rigid laws on the use of psychic powers. Of all the Emperor Mankind's servants, the Sisters of Silence were perhaps the most secretive and mysterious. They are a covert organization that served as the militant arm of the first Divisio Astra Telepathica at the time of the Great Crusade, and the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, since its founding after the Horus Heresy, and within whose ranks and titles they are known at least in formal documentation as the Divisio Investigates, a rather obscure phrase which covers up a shrouded world in which very few have ever had the power to look within. The duties of the Silent Sisterhood were complex and manifold, but at their core, they are warrior investigators, hunters, and jailers. Their charge was to seek out, apprehend, and process from the psychers from the human population of the ever-expanding Imperium and return them to the Divisio Astra Telepathica for assessment and disposition. So when you forget that one brick in the Lego build, yeah, they're the collectors of that one missing brick. As part of their never-ending task, their duty was to also hunt down renegade psychers and destroy those who are deemed too dangerous to the rest of humanity to live. This was a perilous task and well beyond the abilities of any merely human law enforcement or military force, but it is made possible, indeed in some cases seamless in its execution, not simply by the martial prowess of the Sisterhood, but crucially by their fundamental nature as psychic nulls. So they're the daughters of the anathema is another term. The most singular thing about the Sisters of Silence is that each and every single one of them, every woman within its rank, is untouchable. A rare genetic subset of humanity. So they're not human, they're mutants who cast no soul shadow in the warp, meaning they don't have a soul, whose minds are completely immune to psychic assault and an anathema to all those with psychic powers. The mere proximity, being near a Sister of Silence, for psychers, causes discomfort and pain. So if a psyker is physically near a Sister of Silence, they will start feeling unbelievable discomfort and pain just by being near them physically. And you don't even have to be a psyker as well to feel this. You could be a normal human and you feel like disturbed. As it says here, in truth, they will sow fear and disgust in the hearts of those whose minds are without the psyker's gift. No matter how strong-willed they may be, it is a simple and irresistible reaction to the fundamental wrongness of the untouchables, or as it is often put more melodramatically, a body without a soul. So being around them is a miserable experience. Like their existence, their fact that they don't have a soul just feels wrong. And you don't know why it feels wrong, but it just does. This curious and macabre phenomena goes beyond simple absence, as one might feel disturbed by a mannequin or autonoma which is similar to humanity. Like if you're looking at a mannequin or a robot that looks like you, it's going to be a little unnerving because it's like, wow, that's a machine, but it looks so human. But instead, it is observably a preternatural effect, which seems to strike deep against the fundamental unconscious perceptions of all living beings as something malignant and contrary to the natural order of existence. So yeah, these women without souls, like it goes against all things you understand as a living being. There appears to be a perceptible degree of this effect, which vary from individual to individual, with some untouchables having stronger effects in the phenomena than others, and it is from the strongest of these people that the Sisters of Silence are recruited and drawn. It is also noteworthy to the extent that a disturbance caused by an untouchable is evident not only to humanity, but also to all other life forms and xenos, species encountered to some degree or lesser extent. So basically, Aki, I don't know if you saw, but I have internet again. Welcome, and I'm glad you have internet again. Good to see you. I think I heard it somewhere mentioned in your server, but I haven't been keeping up with it right now. But good to have your internet back. So yeah, so even Eldari and orcs, they... Oh. Aki, thank you for the cheer. I appreciate it. This sound effect never gets old for me. So even to orcs, like the blind, brutal savagery of rampaging orcs, or even they get unnerved by psychic nulls. And the Eldari, which most Eldari are psychically attuned, and the ones that are, they experience extreme pain when near a psychic null, a human psychic null, which is crazy. And specifically the Sisters of Silence. So they're psychically attuned. The most potent and perhaps shocking power of psychic nulls, however, is that which makes them the perfect hunters and slayers of psykers. They're untouchable. Such as the Sisters of Silence are almost impossible to affect with imperial powers. Imperial as in the Empyrean, not Imperium. Their minds cannot be taken over, their perceptions cannot be altered, and their bodies cannot be possessed by warp entities. Even the cruder but more direct manipulations of the environment or ambient energy by psykers, such as a conjured fireball or the hurling of debris by telekinetic force, is lessened and sometimes even negated outright by the untouchable's sheer proximity. With psychic nulls such as the Sisters of Silence, specifically chosen for their strength of their gift, it is a case that their minds are not simply absent or inert to psychic mental perception, but howling abysses of darkness that not only negate psychic force directed at them, but actively interfere with the flow of the warp energies into real space around them. So think of it as like a force field. The Sisters of Silence have this natural force field, unnatural force field, because they are psychic nulls, that they cannot be affected. Like if you are under attack by a bunch of psykers, what you want is a Sister of Silence right next to you, because she cannot be hit by any of the shit that they're throwing at you. So they are very powerful, very, very powerful. And they're also really skilled warriors, as you saw in that video before. So it is unknown typically how this gene, like how they are become soulless. It is unknown to how that sort of comes out. It's just people sometimes become pariahs. That's the term. They become pariahs, and pariah genes that are, they technically born without a soul. It is not known how this happens or if it can be replicated. The Imperium tried to, and anytime that it tried to replicate the process, it resulted in catastrophic failure. There was an instance in where the Imperial researchers sort of proposed this idea of what if we created psychic null space marines, and then you'd have an army of those guys, and they would be completely immune to most of the threats in the galaxy because one, they'd be space marines, which means they're the best of the best, and they'd be psychic nulls, so the warp would have no effect on them. That idea was quickly shot down because the space marines and Adeptus Custodes are incapable of becoming psychic nulls, incapable of becoming untouchables. In the long existence of the Custodes and the Space Marines, not a single one has ever been a pariah. Now, it's important to note as well that the Sisters of Silence aren't the only pariahs. Normal human people can be pariahs. They don't have to be women, but the Sisters of Silence are made up entirely of women that are all pariahs, all psychic nulls. And they serve alongside the Custodes, and they're there are two organizations that can freely walk around the Imperial Palace, and they are one of them. The Imperial Palace is where the Emperor resides, and it is the most heavily guarded place in the entire galaxy, or at least one of the most heavily guarded places in the entire galaxy. And the Sisters of Silence and the Adeptus Custodes are the only one that are allowed within the Inner Sanctum. So they're that important. Their duty, their job is so important, as well as the fact that they're just fucking badass warrior women that are able to protect the Emperor and also battle every single psychic threat that the galaxy has thrown at the Imperium effectively, speaks to their credibility and their power. They are insanely powerful. So, yeah. They're fucking cool. They're not as like, I like them a lot, don't get me wrong. They're very cool, but they're not as cool as the Sisters of Battle, because the Sisters of Silence have a lot more lore than the Sisters of Battle, which is strange. It's not strange necessarily, but they just have a lot more like older lore that has been then readapted. Still very cool. And the Sisters of Silence are another example of prejudice, because here's the thing. As I said earlier, being around them even if you're not a psyker, is a painful experience. It is a unnerving experience, and it's just very, like, uncomfortable. So they are often, even though they don't typically interact with people of the Imperium very frequently, when they do, they're very heavily discriminated against / seen as monsters, and so much so that after the Horus Heresy, they were disbanded. They were taken down and disbanded. At least the order was like in terms of name and sort of organization, they were taken down. But the Sisters of Silence still existed physically. Like they didn't all just die or anything like that. They just weren't operating in the same capacity. Very recently in the lore, though, however, the Sisters of Silence have finally started doing stuff again, and their organization has been reestablished. Even though the organization was disbanded, they still operated the same sort of functions that they did when they were around, which is, operate the black ships and transport people to the to Terra or transport psychers to Terra for the sake of the sort of grand tithe that they need to undergo in order to keep the Emperor alive. Because if the Sisters of Silence disbanded and nobody did the sort of 1,000 psycher sacrifice, the Emperor would have been dead 10,000 years ago. Like it would have been bad. So they are an absolute necessity to have. Even though the members of the Inquisition, or not even the Inquisition, but the members of the Imperium, ruling bodies, did not deem their existence necessary because of a lot of the weird sort of stuff that they sort of elicit. Let me see if I can find another video of them really quick. I want to see if I can find the sign language part. Oh, actually, I can actually show you guys a part of how sort of how their powers work, or necessarily their nullification works. So let me get a quick bit of that. So in this is an edit, by the way, so I apologize for the fucking music, but in this scene here, a psyker is losing control and he is sort of lashing out with his psychic powers, and the Sister of Silence is trying to sort of bring him back down. And you'll see her, what basically, like, all of this psychic energy is coming out of him, and as she comes in the frame, it is being pushed away by this sort of barrier that she has. Like, she's completely unaffected. Like, that's insane that they can just do that. Like, it's nothing to her, which is so cool. And that's basically the case for all Sisters of Silence. Like, that, to anybody else, right, that would have been death. That would have just been absolute, like, death and destruction. You would have been fucking rended from your physical body, and your soul would have gone to the warp pretty much instantly. You would have been disintegrated. And she just walked through it. Like, no problem. So cool. And not only are they, you know, like, powerful, they also just look really cool. Like, their armor is awesome. Just a normal day for her. Like, they are some of the nonchalant, coolest, people in the Imperium. I wish I could show you the episode that she's from, this one specific, Sisters of Silence, but Twitch would be really mad at me for that, because I paid for that service, and you can't really stream services that you paid for, because that would be not be under fair use. So yeah, I want to find more examples of her doing, like, the sign language, because she in that episode she does some sign language to communicate, and it's really cool. See if I can find. Oh, here it is. Here we go. Pay less attention to this guy. So my one of the funniest things about them too is, so you just saw her do some sign language. Nobody understands it. Nobody in the Imperium, even Space Marines, understand the sign language, because nobody's taught sign language. Only they are, right? So she assumes everybody knows what she's doing, but she just like does all of her sign language stuff, and the people are like, what? What do you mean? What's that? And the custodies has to step in and, like, basically talk to her and just be like, no, we need to know where your things are. Here we go. We have. Also, can I point out, they're also not augmented, by the way. They're peak human as well. Sisters of Silence are not augmented in any way. They're also just peak human. They have the best armor and equipment that they have, and she is full on sprinting, barreling down this fucking, forest to get this psyker, without breaking a sweat, basically. So, so if you're worried about being a psyker in the Warhammer universe, that is the basic experience. Yeah, the true definition of muscle mommy. They are the Sisters of Battle, and the Sisters of Silence are the true muscle mommies. Look at her. So she just walks through it, no problem. She's like, come here. So let's see here. What else is there to talk about? They fight all these Tyranids? That's a black ship. They put them on. Oh, question. What's your question code? I'm sure I can answer it. How do the Nids act when they're around a Sister of Silence? To them, so I was going to go into detail about this because the Tyranids are a little bit strange. So the Tyranids, they have an interesting effect on the warp. They have souls, but their souls do not sort of like generate stuff into the warp. They're referred to as the shadow in the warp. And so basically what that is like they have presence in the warp, but it's undefinable presence. Like it's a mass that you can't really define as a single Tyranid because it's a huge collective hive mind, and therefore there are Tyranid psychers out there that can pull from the warp, but it's also like Tyranid biology. And so think of it this way. If you're a demon from the warp and you're looking at the sort of this Tyranid hive mind, right? And think of it like a black cloud of smoke in the warp, like in this immaterial space, and you're looking at it. And then this black cloud of smoke encounters a Sisters of Silence, but you can't see the Sisters of Silence. All you can see is this like weird hole in the middle of this black cloud of smoke that is just completely unabated by the smoke that's around it. That's what it's like. So they don't necessarily get affected. Normal Tyranids don't necessarily get affected by the presence of a Sister of Silence, but once there's a psyker, like a Tyranid psyker, like one of them that can manipulate the warp, they do get affected and they get nullified, essentially. And it's the same thing that happens to normal psychers. It's just to the other people who can view the warp, this sort of mass of the shadow in the warp that doesn't have a definable shape sort of gets twisted / moved if they're encountering a Sister of Silence. So to you, if you're looking outside in, it looks like this mass of smoke is being pushed aside a tiny bit, or being moved around, or curving around an invisible object for some reason, even though it shouldn't. Because like I said, the Sisters of Silence don't have a presence in the warp, so it wouldn't just look like anything. So, and then the Tyranids. So typically, also a really important thing to note is since the Tyranids are a shadow in the warp and they're so numerous, when there are other psychers around, they are less powerful because there's so much. The Tyranids are dominating the collective warp space, like mentally. They're dominating it when they're around. So if you're a psyker and you're fighting Tyranids, you will have a harder time using your psychic powers because the Tyranids are practically taking all of the psychic space. So it's an interesting combo, but if you were a psyker and you had a Sister of Silence on your side, you might have an easier time using your powers if you're fighting the Tyranids, but you're also going to be in extreme pain because you've got both the shadow of the warp coming in, making it really hard to control your powers, and then you've got the Sisters of Silence null abilities causing you pain. But it would be, a Sister of Silence is like an equalizer. Yeah, so Yeah, they're pretty cool. The Sisters of Silence are pretty fucking cool. I'll show you another instance of where they come down and they don't understand. But we have ads in just a moment. Hey, Aiden, welcome in, bud. Oh, wow, it's a full 2 minutes into that video before they actually start reacting. That's crazy. We're going to let the ad run, and then we are going to play. Bro, he called these guys Imperial Fist. They are not Imperial Fists. This hurts my ears. They are, it's very wrong. That is a Silver Templar, not an Imperial Fist. They are related to the Imperial Fist, but they aren't Imperial Fists. God, that hurt. That hurt to hear. I regret listening to these guys. Yeah, you're technically right about the White Templars as they are Imperial Fist successors, but they are not Imperial Fists. Even though they're successors, they can still be very genetically different as well as dispositionally different. So yeah, so in this episode, she pulls up and she starts speaking sign language, and the Space Marines don't even know what she's talking about. Also, I watched sort of an analysis. Salamanders and the fire. I think the fire dragons. Salamanders have a few other. Yeah, they have a. So for example, actually a great example is the Dark Krakens. The Dark Krakens are a successor chapter of the Salamanders, and they are very different than the Salamanders. They don't really have the same sort of compassion for people as the Salamanders do. And on top of that, the Dark Krakens are monster hunters. They are quite literally playing Monster Hunter Wilds every single day. That is the Dark Krakens. They hunt giant monsters and beasts on their home world as sports. And anytime they're in a fight, the Dark Krakens, they always seek out the biggest, strongest foes and duel them. And they're Salamander successors, apparently. They're pretty cool. I can do a whole fucking Warhammer Wednesday on them as well if I wanted to. But yeah, so I can imagine them just it is just proof of the hero. I fucking love that song, by the way. Literally, it's like in one of the Dark Kraken's books, one of the character of that book, he quite literally faces off a giant sea serpent on a boat, and it's literally just him in his power armor and a fucking like blade the size of his arm, and he just dives into the water and just fucking fights it. By himself. Like, it is hype as fuck, and it's literally just Monster Hunter. Like, it's him by himself on a ship with a bunch of humans, and they're all like, you can't take that thing. That's a giant sea serpent. They're nearly unkillable on this planet. And he's like, bet, I'm gonna go fight that bitch. And he's like, they are having so much fun as Space Marines. Like, they barely break a sweat when doing that. And of course, they do a lot of like, like fighting for the Imperium and stuff like that. But most of the time, their recreational activities is fighting giant monsters and creatures. And also it's an oddity within the Imperium because Space Marines don't typically do recreational activities. They are always sort of focused on getting better and improving. But like the Krakens, the Dark Krakens are they're unique in this in the aspect that they like to entertain themselves by doing stuff like this, where they hunt monsters and stuff like that. So they're very cool. So anyway, yeah. So she does some sign language, and the Space Marines do not know what she's talking about. And so then she looks at the Custodes, and the Custodes has to explain what she said. Anyway, we're not going to watch any more of this because that's enough of that with these two. But sign language is a dead concept. Only the Sisters of Silence know it because they take a vow of silence and they can't speak. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of some other things that I was going to say about them, but they're pretty cool. I wish that my problem with this episode, because this custodian is a woman, right? And they make it about the fact that she's a woman, or at least it's a side effect of the episode that she's a woman. And when you have this Sister of Silence right here, which is essentially the same thing, just a normal human being and not a super augmented woman. Like it just pisses me off because like she's right here. The Sister of Silence is right here. Why couldn't we just make the episode about the Sister of Silence if you wanted it to be about a woman? Because the Sister of Silence, I guarantee you, people know more about the Custodies than they know about the Sister of Silence. So why not explore that? Why not explore the Sisters of Silence in this episode? It would be so much better than what we got. This episode was good. Don't get me wrong. I liked watching the Custodies in action, but I would have liked to see the Sister of Silence perspective of it more than the Custodies. Because making the Custodies a woman in this instance didn't really add or take anything away from it. It just kind of made it like, okay, thanks, I guess. Yeah, like it doesn't make sense because especially in the current lore, or at least not in the current lore, but in the older lore, it is never, to be fair to the people who say that it's possible that they could be female Custodies, in the old lore, it never said that they couldn't be female. However, it is said many times that the members of the Adeptus Custodies are all men, or have all been men, or all sons of the Emperor. And there's 10,000 of them, etc., right? And the Custodies have always been, in the perception of them, men. So then, if that's the case, if the Custodies aren't meant to be men, as this episode is trying to tell us, then why are the Sisters of Silence a thing? Because it is very clear that the Sisters of Silence are a female counterpart to the Custodies. Otherwise, you could have just made an order of psychic null men instead of making them women. Because it's the same dichotomy with the Adeptus Sororitas. The Adeptus Sororitas are the same to Space Marines in almost every way. They've got power armor, they use bolters, they have similar armor, and they're very faithful, and they're powerful, and they can fight Space Marines, right? They're very similar to Space Marines, except that they're women. So clearly, the Sisters of Battle are the answer to the female Space Marine problem, right? And the Sisters of Silence are the answer to the female Custody problem because they are the counterpart. They look the same, they serve in the same area, but they do a little bit of a different role, but they're all women. So why make the Custodies female when you already have that female representation in the Sisters of Silence? And also you have that female representation in the Sisters of Silence, an already underrepresented organization that you could have used this episode to bring more eyes to it. I think the Sisters of Silence are severely underrated and severely people don't know about them. People do not know about the Sisters of Silence. Most 40K fans have heard of them, but they don't know anything about them, right? So use this as an opportunity to both push the, diversity with women, with an already existing group of people in the Warhammer universe that don't get enough love, and then spotlight them and put them on a pedestal in this episode so people actually get interested in them. Because I guarantee you, if you did that, people who don't know Warhammer and who are seeing this episode for the first time, if they're interested in getting into Warhammer, are like, whoa, these Sisters of Silence chicks are super cool. I want to build an army of them. I want to read about them, right? That's how you organically get people interested in the setting. But instead, you gave us the Custodies, which everybody loves the Custodies. They're super cool. But you made it a woman too, which you didn't have to do because everybody already knows what they are, already knows what the Custodies are. And then you have your Sisters of Silence be the side character rather than the main character of the story. And I just feel like it's snubbing the Sisters of Silence. I think they should have got more representation in the episode. I think it should have been about them, and it wasn't. And the episode was good, but I was still disappointed in sort of that the way that they executed. And also because the whole hubbub about female custodies and everybody getting pissed about it. I could care less. Like I said, my biggest thing with female custodies is I do not care if there are female custodies, but they have to be implemented in a actual way that makes sense. Because the way that they were written into the lore recently was, oh, there's always been female custodies. What are you talking about? Rather than like explaining, because it goes against a lot of what we've learned. And also, I will say, the author who wrote that in that little excerpt, because it was in a codex book, which is like a rule book for an army. Yeah, the tweet absolutely did the wrong delivery. Absolutely. Because it made it sort of a retaliatory remark rather than be like, no, it has the possibility of being a thing, that female custodies could be a thing, rather than be like, no, you're wrong. And there's always been women in the custodies. And I'm like, okay, show me some proof, right? And also that tweet and that writing, that little short story in the codex, and I have the codex, so I can pull it. I don't have it with me here, but I have it at home. I could read that exact excerpt. And, you know, in the subsequent, like, sort of, the GW did sort of like a clean up all the fire moment where it like tried to douse the flames and basically rescinded and went back on their word by saying that, oh, that was just a mistake. And so it's not necessarily canon anymore that there are female custodies. It's dubious, right? But like it was just a whole debacle that threw the fan base into rage. And the thing is, I do not have a problem with it. I do not have a problem with female custodies. All I care about is implementation. I think if you're going to write a story with a female custodies in it, then the one thing you need to do is not make it about the fact that it's a woman. Because too many times that has happened where it's like, oh, we're making this person a woman, or we're making this character that are typically men into a woman, and instead of telling a good story, you simply just say, oh, it's about a woman, so it's automatically good. Like, if the story is about a fact that she's doing things that men normally can do and doing it better, that's not a good story. That's just annoying. Because it's annoying when it's done for men as well. When you're telling this story and all of the story beats and all of the big sort of moments in this book or in this movie are like, he did it because he was a man, right? Or she did it because she was a woman, is ridiculous. And it takes away from the actual story you're trying to tell. Instead, what you can do is you write a story about a custodes, and that custodes just happens to be female, but it's not a plot point. I feel like that's what more insulting. GW, known for their writing and everything, just said, nah, just make it happen. Yeah. Like, if the custodian is a woman, it shouldn't be a plot point that the story is based around. It should be, and this may sound weird, but it should be an afterthought. Because the gender of your character shouldn't matter. Right? It shouldn't matter in the actual themes of the story, in the actual, like, overarching plot. So it's like you're filling out a document and you just simply write down your gender and you move past it. And you move past it and you move on to the rest of the document. It's the same situation where it's like, here are the things that you need to know about this character. They're a custodes, they're female, they are on this mission, they have these allies with them, and here's the plot, right? See how quickly we went past all of those bullet points? Because that's not crucial to the actual plot of the story. That's just the character and the persona that is in the story. That's our main character, right? Whereas they will write it where it's like, it's a custodes and they're with these people and this is their mission and she's a woman and that's why she's strong. See how I swapped that? And now I made the woman part of the plot? Like made the fact that it's a woman part of the plot. That ruins the story because you're injecting such a small part of the character into the actual plot. Because I believe that being a man is a small part of the plot. I think being a woman is a small part of the plot. That's the equality there of it, is that, your gender shouldn't matter for the character. The character could be whatever they need to be or whatever they want to be, but it shouldn't become a plot point. Unless it is a story unless the story is about gender, which if you're writing a 40K story, shouldn't be about gender. Like, gender is the last thing I want to hear about when I'm reading Warhammer. I want to read about massive battles happening in the Guard fighting against Tyranids. That you're fighting and dying for humanity. Gender is the last thing you should be concerned about. So that's sort of how I feel about that aspect. It's not something that you should like persecute people on if they do like female custodies, or if they don't like female custodies. There are some people in there with some really bad takes that don't like female custodies because they're women. Eldar mentioned. We'll do an Eldar deep dive at some point in the future for a Warhammer Wednesday, maybe when I get back to the States. But yeah, so like don't harass people, don't fucking, do that kind of shit because they like female custodies or they dislike female custodies. Just be sure to remind people that there are alternatives to that stuff, such as the Sisters of Silence and such as the Sisters of Battle, because those are the actual really cool actual factions and characters that have so much more lore and time and attention given to them that should be looked at and should be spotlighted. Because that's the point of making it. And so that kind of brings me into my ending bit of it, because I think next time I'll talk about the Death Cult Assassins and the Calidus Assassins for when I cover just the Assassins for Warhammer Wednesday. But I think GW could have done it more cleanly than gaslighting the community, given more lore explanation than just saying they've always been there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we went over that. Yeah, it's a retaliatory statement is what it is. From them, that is a retaliatory statement. Rather than a explanation, it is a, you guys are mad at us, stay mad. You know what I mean? That's sort of what that is. Okay, so we are going to wrap it up here because I have to get some stuff done. And I do plan on hanging out in the Discord tonight for people who are interested in hanging out and just chatting and playing games. I've got a few things that I have to do just before that, so it should be like a couple minutes. But that is Warhammer Wednesday today. I appreciate everybody. Appreciate everybody coming in and just yapping with me. Like I said, I love Warhammer. I'm a huge nerd about it, so I've got all this knowledge that I would love to share with you guys. And Warhammer Wednesday will only get better as the more we do it. I just ask that you guys show up because it's important. I don't want to be talking to a wall. So I appreciate you guys being here. It was awesome. I had a great time, and I love talking about my favorite faction and then also the really cool Sisters of Silence. This is not the last time that we will talk about them. In fact, we will likely be doing videos like this, like on repeat. When you do those drums, so big sad. GP, I learned so much. I'm glad you learned a lot. But yeah, we will be revisiting the Sisters of Battle in different capacities. We will be revisiting the Sisters of Silence in different capacities, talking about like characters, talking about some of their weapons and armor. But that's at a later date. And also my voice is tired. So yeah, I do have a surprise for all of you guys before we go and before we raid out. I gotta find someone to raid, but the surprise will come when we are raiding. So let me see who is live right now, and we will raid them. Let's raid my buddy Shiro. He is currently doing some just chatting, so it should be pretty chill, and I love Shiro. He's awesome. So we're gonna raid him. We're not going to do a raid message today, so just, pop in, say hi, chill out with Shiro, and just be good, Okay, so as we're raiding out, you guys are going to see something new when I switch screens. Like I said, I've got my other screen that I had before that was new, but this one I think you guys will like as well, is my new outro screen, so hopefully you enjoy it. Thank you all for joining me, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, or night. And I will see you guys next time.